Hi, Shanna Rowe Jackson here from Caution Artist at Play, and today I would like to talk with you about different ways to find inspiration without having to really go outside of your house, or at least not too far from your house. But first, let me tell you a little bit about what I'm working on here. This is not going to be a tutorial on how to draw strawberries. However, I will be showing you a time-lapse of my recent strawberry drawing. This drawing was inspired by strawberries in my own backyard, and working on this drawing is what really got me thinking about how often I really rely on my surroundings for inspiration, and I thought that it would be good to share some of these tips with you as well, so that if you are looking for inspiration, or if you're struggling with art block, or perhaps you are having a hard time finding references, I thought that these tips would be really helpful to show you ways that you can find inspiration right where you are at. And these tips aren't meant to be a cure-all, they're really just a starting point to help you find new ways to look for inspiration. Just a bit more information about this piece. I am using a lot of different brands of colored pencils for this piece, including Holbein, Polychromos, Prismacolor, Luminance, Derwent Drawing, and Lightfast, and I think even some Soho. Basically, I just grabbed whatever colors I thought I would need from whatever brands that I typically use. Because my studio space is not very organized at the moment, I just grabbed what I thought I needed. I'm also blending with odorless mineral spirits because I am using some of the Neocolor 1 wax pastels in the background for more coverage, and those blend best with OMS. And I also used one Neocolor 2 for the base of the green strawberries, basically just because I didn't have that color in the Neocolor ones. And this is on Arch's hot press watercolor paper. I will link everything in the description below. I figured I would just give you that information now, because I usually get questions about what I am using. Okay, so let's get back to the subject of this video. If you are struggling with art block or just having a hard time finding inspiration, I want you to know that you don't have to go too far out of your comfort zone just to find inspiration. You can find inspiration all around. And finding inspiration right where you are at is not only a great way to kind of document your life, it's also a wonderful way to create memories through your artwork that other people might be able to resonate with and relate to. And I've been spending a lot of time in the garden lately. We have an awesome fruit and vegetable garden. We also have various flower beds around the yard. So obviously, I'm very fortunate that I have a lot of inspiration around me. However, you don't have to have a garden in order to find inspiration. You can make something out of nothing when it comes to art. The most mundane things can become the most beautiful paintings. And so let me tell you some of the tips that I use for trying to find inspiration when I just cannot find a reference elsewhere, or if you're somebody who is concerned about copyright, and FYI, if you're not concerned about copyright, you should be. You don't want to be just grabbing photos off of the internet for inspiration unless you have permission from the original creator or it is from a copyright-free website, because they could be copywritten and you could get into legal trouble down the line. And also, let's not step on other artists' toes, because that's just not cool. And a great way to avoid all that hassle is to just work from your own references or your own surroundings. But furthermore, sometimes you just are not sure where to start. And so these tips are to help you find a way to look around where you are in the moment and get some inspiration. So my first tip is to think about yourself and what you love. What are your main interests? We tend to surround ourselves with the things that inspire us the most, the things that are innately us. And so that is a great starting point for your art. So if you're struggling and you just don't know what to draw, think about what you're most interested in. It could be your favorite cup of tea or coffee in the morning. If you love to read, you could use your books as inspiration. For instance, you could maybe do a character design on somebody that you are reading about, or illustrate a chapter that you're reading. Or you could even stack your books up and make a still life and draw those. If art is your main interest, then draw your art supplies. Many of us, if you're doing art, you probably have plenty of art supplies around, and art supplies are so aesthetically pleasing. Just throw some together and do a still life out of that and draw those. I've done that before for an assignment in school. I just took a ballpoint pen and drew a picture of a bunch of my brushes and acrylic paints. Lindsay, the Frugal Crafter, she has done that as well on her channel. She just recently did a video where she drew some art supplies or painted some art supplies. And it's really a great way to get your creative juices flowing. And it's a subject that you know really well and you'll be connected to. And so it's just a lot of fun. So look around your house and see what you are interested in the most. What do you surround yourself with? It could even be food. I've drawn candy 1,000 times because I really love candy. So your favorite treat, your favorite whatever, could be your favorite character. Just draw something that is something that you love. My next tip is really similar to the first tip, except it takes a little less thought. So if you are really struggling with art block, or if you're in a slump and you're having a hard time even thinking about the things that you love, because life is hard sometimes, and sometimes we get into that state of mind, and you really just do not have the energy to try and think of something at all, then I suggest you just grab 3 to 5 random objects that are in your vicinity, put them together, and just draw a picture of them or paint a picture of them. You can throw them together, put them next to a window so you have some lighting, and then grab whatever's closest to you. A ballpoint pen, a pencil, a Sharpie, whatever you have closest to you. It could be a crayon, it doesn't even matter. And just sit there and draw those objects. This is going to get your creative juices flowing. It's going to exercise your creative muscles. And it doesn't take a lot of energy or a lot of thought. It doesn't have to be that deep, but it will get you creating again. And that is probably the most important part, especially when you're feeling that way. Artist block can be very depressing. And sometimes all you need is to just start. And if you're struggling with that, that's what I suggest to do. It doesn't have to be anything special. They don't even have to make sense together. It can be a can of soda, a tripod, and a pencil sharpener. It doesn't really matter as long as you're just drawing. And then once you get moving and drawing or painting, then you can start feeling your imagination kick in again. And maybe if you want to get a little bit more creative with it, you can start adding things to it that aren't there. Use your imagination to add characters. Maybe there's a little guy hanging off the end of the pencil sharpener, or maybe there is an ant hanging out on the top of the can of soda. You know, like, the important thing is to just let things flow naturally and not give yourself any pressure. I remember when I was in college, one of the exercises that they had us do the most in my Drawing 1 class was to just draw these random objects. We had a hodgepodge of objects that people had donated to the classroom, and we had them in this big cabinet, and they were all painted white. So that way there we could practice values very easily. And none of them made sense. We would set up these still lifes every day, and they would not make sense. It'd be a skull and a shoe and a flower and these random things that didn't make sense. But it taught us how to draw. It didn't matter what the subject was. We were still drawing, and we were still learning form, and we were still learning value and shape and the way negative shapes interact with the positive shapes and all of that, all the important things that you get from drawing from observation. However, I'm somebody who really likes things to make sense, and so I would kind of put a twist on mine. And I remember we did a pointillism exercise or a stippling exercise, and we had like this random animal skull and some flowers, and I'll show you the drawing here. And we basically were just drawing that in class, and then I was like, this makes no sense at all. So it got my creative juices flowing, and I decided to have these little characters in my scene. I made a whole scene out of it. It was like this skull was in the desert, and these surveyors and archaeologists or something had discovered this skull, and they were on the scene, and they were just checking it out and photographing and things like that. And so that's what I added into mine. And basically my point is that you can grab something mundane that has no thought to it whatsoever, but since you're an artist, you can make it something that never existed before. And again, though, don't put that pressure on yourself. Just let it happen naturally. If that doesn't come, that's fine. At least you drew today. At least you got out of that that block and you took the baby step to start drawing again. And that's the main takeaway from this tip. The next tip that I have for finding inspiration where you are at is if you are somebody who likes to do portraiture, then draw yourself. Self-portraits can be very emotive, and they are a great exercise to practice anatomy and to practice portraiture. So just take a selfie or grab your camera and pose in front of it in different ways so that you can practice different poses for figures, or even grab a mirror. It's really difficult to draw from a mirror. It's a great challenge. We had to do this in school quite a bit as well. And you'll really see things in a different way, because having to draw from life is a whole different arena than drawing from photographs. And it really works a different set of creative muscles. And so I definitely suggest you do it. And I have done a million self-portraits in my time. And then if you get bored of drawing yourself, ask your best friends. Ask your friends if they'll pose for you. I know for a little while I had an idea where I wanted to do all kinds of fairy tales and things like that. And my friend Chantel and I went out to the woods. She wore her Halloween costume and I took a bunch of photos from her, and I did quite a few pieces from those photos that I took that day. I turned her into Little Red Riding Hood in one. I did just a portrait of her. And then I also did some drawing exercises for class where I broke just parts of her face down and drew those. It was endless inspiration. And I'm sure that if you have friends that are supportive of your art, they wouldn't mind posing for you. Or you can ask them to draw their selfies. I've done that before too. My best friend that I've grown up with since I was just a little girl, she posted a selfie where she looked fantastic. And I'm like, I gotta draw this. And so she obviously was very happy with me drawing it. And so you don't have to go far to find great references. You just have to be creative about it, and don't be afraid to ask those that are closest to you, and don't be afraid to use yourself. You don't have to make it look exactly like you, but the pose or, even a certain facial expression or any of that is going to be good practice for later on when you decide to draw other people. Okay, so my next tip is to get outside into your immediate surroundings and see what you find. Explore where you live. Chances are you are walking by certain things every day and not noticing them because you're just so used to them. But if you go out with your camera or you go out with your sketchbook, you're going to see them in a whole new light, and the possibilities are endless. As I mentioned, I get the majority of my references right in my own yard. I happen to be lucky that I live out in the country and I'm inspired by nature. But even if you live in the city, what is it about your immediate neighborhood that makes it unique? Every single neighborhood has its own story to tell. Every neighborhood has something that makes it that neighborhood. What is that? What is that makes it so special? And so, look at those things and draw them and paint them. And since it's a subject that you know so intimately well, your feelings and your memories are going to come through, and it's going to really make a more dynamic piece of artwork. So I suggest you go out with your phone. Photography is more accessible to all of us now than ever because most phones have great cameras on them. Even the most basic phones have cameras that will make passable reference photos. And just take pictures of random objects that you see. Don't get in people's faces and things like that. Be very careful about privacy and things like that. And if you do want to, do some sort of portrait of somebody, ask them first. You can obviously do urban sketching right on the scene where you're sketching people from life. And that's a little bit different. But, obviously if you're out there taking photos, people might get a little bit why are you taking a picture of me? So just be very careful when you're doing these things. But yeah, what is it about your area that makes it what it is? And what is it that you love about it? Why have you lived there for so long? Or why did you move there? So think of those things and bring them to your artwork. We're so reliant on going on the internet to find reference photos these days that we forget to look around and see what is right around us that could be used as a reference. And chances are, it's going to be more of a personal artwork if you are painting something that you know so well. So yeah, just take a look around and see things in a whole new light. My next tip kind of goes along with the first couple of tips, and that is to draw what is right in front of you right now. So it kind of goes along with the grabbing random objects, but this is like even less thought than that. Just look up. What do you got there? A can of soda? I've drawn so many cans of soda. I've drawn so many bottles of water, but every time is practice. So if you only have a few minutes and you're just trying to be creative, like you have kids and, you know, they're down for a nap and you don't have much time to create, so you can't really get into a very serious project and you don't know what to paint, just look at something in front of you. Draw the lamp, draw the fan, draw the TV, draw what's on the TV. Whatever is in front of you in this very moment, give yourself like a time limit, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and sketch as fast as you can. And this way, you're not going to be so worried about how it looks. You're just going to be engaged in the act of creating, which is very important if you have had art block or if you're somebody who can't find time to create, but you really, really want to. Just draw something. Sit down. Again, like I said earlier, grab the nearest utensil, ballpoint pen, pencil, whatever, and just draw what is directly in front of you. Give yourself a time limit and see where it goes. My next tip is to draw from imagination. You know, we've been talking a lot about referencing things in this video, but you don't always need references. Go where your mind takes you. And if you're having a hard time, again, because of art block or something like that, trying to figure out where to start, just sit down and draw some lines and see where they go. And if that doesn't work for you, maybe use some prompts. I talk about this a lot on my channel. When I'm doing especially illustrative stuff, I love working from prompts. I created my inspiration box on the channel a while back, and I recently just did a video on the paint chip poetry game where I use that as prompts. One of my favorite things to do in my sketchbook is to think of 3 random words and put them together and make a drawing. Like my turtle, what was it? It was turtle, flower, and pineapple. That was one of my favorite illustrations, and I just thought of 3 random words and I drew it in my sketchbook. So use your imagination. You know, maybe even do a continuation each time. Like maybe in between your more serious work, you have a little story going on and you are creating this character. It could be Mipsy the mouse, I don't know. And she lives out in the yard underneath the stairs, and she's got a cellar that goes down, and her doorway goes and meets up with Mr. Groundhog. Who knows? You never know. Like, just let your mind wander. Be a child again. Nothing is too silly or too fantastical or too whatever to create art about. It's just create art. And like I said, if you need prompts, definitely do prompts. You could go to the hardware store and get those paint samples, those like paint cards that have all these paint chips on them, and throw those in a basket and grab 3 random colors and do a 3 color challenge, and then make up whatever you want to that is inspired by those colors. So there's plenty of ways that you can find inspiration right where you are at, and these are my favorite ways. And again, there's nothing wrong with referencing things as long as you are using legal references. On the internet, you just have to be very careful because you don't want to be, you know, infringing on other people's copyright or anything like that. But there's something to be said from looking at your own internal world and creating from that. My whole scope narrowed when I started working only from my own reference photos, because that meant I was only working from my own experiences. Now, I'm not saying everybody has to do that, because there are some people who really enjoy creating marine life, like Lisa Clow, for instance. She's not going to be hanging out under the sea anytime soon, you know? So, like, obviously, go with what interests you the most. And if that's the case, then yes, you're going to have to find external sources for your references. Just make sure you're doing it legally. But these are more tips for people who are having issues with trying to narrow their view or trying to, just create in general because they're struggling with art block. And I just thought that I would share them with you because I've been thinking a lot lately about how my style has narrowed quite a bit since I've been relying on my own reference photos, and I've been basically just looking at myself a lot and looking at my life a lot and using that as inspiration, and especially nature. I've been really diving into nature lately. And this summer especially has been very centered around my gardens. I have that vegetable garden, which is where I got, the strawberry references. I also drew a lupin, and that was the first time we've ever been able to really keep a lupin alive in my yard, which is crazy because I live in Maine and they're everywhere. But for some reason, our yard does not like to keep lupin flowers. And they're one of my all-time favorite flowers that I have so many memories of from a child. And I've really been diving into that. I've been leaning into that a lot lately, looking at my world around me, helping my husband grow these beautiful vegetables and fruits and flowers, and really looking at that. And I guess this is kind of my way of showing my appreciation for the fact that I have these things. And so finding inspiration right where I'm at, to me, means really appreciating the life that I have. And none of us really has an easy life, and some people have it worse than others. But if we can find that glimmer and we can use our art to feel inspired about our lives again, I think that's a really great thing. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found this helpful. I hope that you will be able to use these tips in your own artwork. I really aim to inspire on this channel and to help other artists become the best artists that they can be. So if that is something that interests you, please feel free to subscribe if you haven't already, and like this video and share it with somebody who may need it. All right, thank you so much for watching. I will see you next week. You have a great day. Bye.